Thomas had always been a loyal and hard-working employee at Lambert Industries. For over 10 years, he had dedicated his life to the company, often staying late, solving complex problems, and helping the business grow. He was the kind of employee any company would consider an asset. He believed in the value of hard work, and he trusted that his dedication would be rewarded one day. But he was wrong. One gloomy Tuesday morning, Thomas was summoned to Mr. Lambert's office. At first, he thought it might be for a new project or perhaps a promotion. After all, he had been leading a successful team, and his results had consistently exceeded expectations. He adjusted his tie, straightened his shirt, and walked confidently toward the office, his mind racing with possibilities. But the moment he stepped into the office, he felt a chill in the air. Mr. Lambert, a stout man in his 50s with a stern expression, didn't even look up from his paperwork at first. His secretary quietly closed the door behind Thomas, leaving him standing awkwardly in the center of the room. "Thomas, please take a seat," Lambert finally said, his voice devoid of warmth. Thomas's confidence wavered slightly, but he obeyed. "Thomas, I won't waste your time. The company is going through a restructuring phase, and we have to make some difficult decisions. Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated effective immediately." The words hit Thomas like a ton of bricks. His mind went blank for a second, and then panic set in. "Sir, I don't understand. I've been with the company for over a decade. I've always exceeded expectations. This must be a mistake." "It's not a mistake, Thomas. It's a business decision. Please understand," Lambert said, his tone cold and calculated. Thomas felt his throat tighten. "But I've dedicated my life to this company. I've sacrificed weekends, late nights, and holidays. I've trained half of the team here. How can I just be discarded like this? Your severance package will be processed. HR will handle the rest. That's all, Thomas. Thank you for your service." Lambert's eyes remained on his paperwork, a clear indication that the conversation was over. Thomas sat there for a moment, frozen. His world had just shattered, but the man before him seemed completely indifferent. Slowly, he rose from his chair, his legs feeling weak beneath him. The secretary gave him a sympathetic look as he left the office, but it did nothing to ease his pain. Walking back to his desk, Thomas felt the stares of his colleagues, some of whom had already heard the news. He avoided their gazes, feeling a mix of shame and anger. He packed his belongings in a cardboard box, the familiar workspace now feeling like a hostile environment. As he walked out of the building, a light drizzle began to fall, matching his somber mood. Thomas stood outside the glass doors for a moment, looking up at the towering building he had once considered his second home. Now, it was just a cold, unfeeling fortress. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his wife. "Claire, how's your day going? Hope everything is fine." Thomas's hands trembled as he typed a simple reply, "We need to talk when I get home." On the rainy walk home, his mind replayed the meeting over and over. How could he have been so naive? How could someone he trusted betray him so easily? The company he had helped build had turned its back on him without a second thought. And worse, he had nothing to show for his years of sacrifice. But as Thomas stepped into his tiny apartment, a small spark of determination began to ignite within him. He had been knocked down, but he wasn't defeated. Not yet. Thomas walked back to his small apartment, his mind clouded with disbelief and despair. Losing his job at Lambert Industries wasn't just a financial blow, it was a betrayal. He had given his heart and soul to that company, believing that loyalty would be rewarded. But instead, he had been discarded like an old piece of furniture. The rain continued to fall, each drop feeling like a reminder of his helplessness. When he opened the door to his modest one-bedroom apartment, Claire, his wife, looked up from the couch. Her smile quickly faded when she saw the look on his face. "Thomas? What's wrong?" she asked, standing up, her voice filled with concern. I lost my job," he whispered, his voice cracking. Claire's face went pale. "Lost your job? But, how? You've been working there for years." Mr. Lambert said it was a business decision, Thomas explained bitterly. After all these years, all my dedication, nothing mattered. Claire hugged him tightly, but her embrace did little to ease the pain gnawing at his chest. That night, Thomas barely slept. His mind raced with questions. How would they pay the rent? What about their bills? His pride had been shattered, but his immediate worry was survival. The days that followed were a nightmare. Thomas sent out dozens of resumes, but most companies didn't even respond. The few interviews he managed to secure ended in polite rejections. They all said the same thing: we are looking for someone with more experience in leadership, or we've decided to move forward with another candidate. Thomas began to feel like a ghost in his own home. He would wake up early, dress in his best suit, and leave the apartment pretending he was still going to work. But instead, he would sit at a nearby cafe, browsing job listings on his old laptop, trying to avoid Claire's worried looks. Their savings began to dwindle. Claire picked up extra shifts at her part-time job to make ends meet, but it wasn't enough. The bills piled up, and arguments between them became more frequent. Claire's patience, once a source of comfort, began to wear thin. "Thomas, you can't keep pretending this will just fix itself," she shouted one night, tears in her eyes. "We need a plan. We can't survive like this." "I know, Claire." Thomas snapped, his voice rising. "You think I'm not trying? You think I enjoy feeling like a failure every single day?" Silence fell between them. Claire turned away, wiping her tears. "I didn't marry a failure, Thomas. I married a man who never gave up. Where is that man now?" Her words cut deep. Thomas spent that night sitting on the balcony, staring at the city lights. He felt trapped in a dark tunnel with no way out. The confidence he once had was gone, replaced by a crushing sense of shame. He started avoiding his friends, ashamed to admit his situation. He didn't want their pity. Weeks turned into months. The rent was overdue, their electricity was cut off for 2 days, and the grocery shopping became a constant calculation of what they could afford. Thomas began to question everything about himself, his skills, his worth, even his existence. But beneath the despair, a small flame of anger burned. Not just at Mr. Lambert, but at himself for letting this situation define him. How could he, a man who had built entire teams and solved complex problems, be so powerless now? One evening, as Thomas walked back home from yet another failed interview, he stopped at a bookstore. His eyes caught a title on the shelf, "Turning Failure into Fortune." Something inside him stirred. He picked up the book and flipped through the pages. It was filled with stories of people who had lost everything, only to rebuild stronger than ever. That night, Thomas read the book cover to cover. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of hope. He didn't know how, but he knew he couldn't stay defeated forever. It was time for him to become the man he had always believed he could be. Thomas was tired of feeling helpless. Every rejection letter, every sympathetic look from Claire, every missed bill payment felt like a blow to his self-esteem. But that night, as he finished reading Turning Failure into Fortune, something shifted within him. The stories of people who had risen from the ashes, who had turned adversity into opportunity, lit a small spark in his heart. He wasn't going to be defeated. Not like this. The next morning, Thomas woke up early. For the first time in months, he didn't put on his old work suit to maintain the facade. Instead, he wore a simple shirt and jeans, grabbed his notebook, and went to the nearest park. Sitting on a quiet bench, he began writing, not a resume, but ideas. Dozens of ideas. He listed his skills: management, team leadership, strategic planning, customer relations. He then listed his experience, over a decade at Lambert Industries, leading teams, improving processes, and driving profits. But most importantly, he listed his dream, to be his own boss, to build something of his own that no one could take away. Thomas's mind raced. What if he used his expertise to offer consulting services? Small businesses always struggled with management and growth strategies. What if he could help them succeed? He didn't need a big office or a fancy title. He needed a plan. That same day, he went home and spent hours online, learning about starting a consulting business. He watched videos, read articles, and even joined free online forums where entrepreneurs shared their experiences. Each new piece of information fueled his determination. With the little savings they had left, Thomas built a simple website. He called his consulting service Strategic Solutions. He wrote about his experience, his passion for helping businesses grow, and the value he could provide. But it wasn't enough to have a website, he needed clients. Thomas printed out flyers with his logo and walked around the city, visiting small businesses, cafes, shops, startups. At first, he was met with polite smiles and empty promises. Some business owners didn't even take his flyers. But he refused to be discouraged. Every morning, Thomas would wake up, put on a confident smile, and set out with his flyers. He would introduce himself, ask about the business, listen to the owner's struggles, and offer free initial consultations. It was exhausting and sometimes humiliating, but he kept pushing. One day, a small bakery owner named Mrs. Carter agreed to give him a chance. Her business was struggling due to poor inventory management and a lack of customers. Thomas analyzed her operations, redesigned her workflow, and launched a simple social media campaign to attract customers. Within 2 weeks, Mrs. Carter's sales increased by 30%. She was overjoyed and recommended Thomas to other local businesses. Slowly, his phone started to ring. A coffee shop needed help with staff management. A local bookstore needed a customer retention strategy. One by one, Thomas began to build a network. Claire, who had watched his struggle in silence, noticed the change. Thomas was no longer the defeated man who moped around the house. He was energized, focused, and driven. One evening, she hugged him tightly. "I knew you weren't a failure," she whispered. But Thomas wasn't done. He expanded his services, creating packages for small businesses, startup strategy, financial planning, team management. He even started a small YouTube channel, sharing business tips, which slowly gained followers. As weeks turned into months, Thomas's reputation grew. He was no longer just a man trying to survive. He was a consultant, a problem solver who helped businesses thrive. His income stabilized, and for the first time in months, they paid their bills on time. They even managed to save a little. But deep inside, Thomas knew this was just the beginning. The wound of betrayal from Lambert Industries still lingered, but it no longer controlled him. It was now his fuel. His phone rang one Friday afternoon. A voice on the other end spoke nervously. "Mr. Thomas? I was referred to you by Mrs. Carter. I own a chain of stores, and we're facing some serious issues. Could we schedule a consultation?" Thomas smiled. "Of course. I'd be happy to help." From a man crushed by betrayal, he was now becoming a respected problem solver. He wasn't just rebuilding his life, he was building an empire. Thomas's consulting business, Strategic Solutions, was no longer just a side hustle. It had become his lifeline, his redemption, and his empire in the making. What began as a desperate attempt to survive had transformed into a thriving enterprise. Word spread quickly about his expertise. His first clients, like Mrs. Carter's Bakery, became his greatest advocates. Business owners would recommend him to their friends, and soon, his phone was ringing almost non-stop. From struggling cafes and small retail shops to emerging startups, everyone seemed to need his advice. But Thomas didn't stop there. He knew he needed to build his brand, so he focused on expanding his presence. He invested in a more professional website, using his growing income to hire a designer. His new website was clean, modern, and featured client testimonials that highlighted his impact. He also started creating educational content. His YouTube channel, where he shared business tips and strategies, began gaining traction. Entrepreneurs appreciated his straightforward advice, delivered in a calm, confident voice. His videos on how to manage a small business and top 5 mistakes new business owners make gained thousands of views. Comments poured in, thanking him for his insights. Thomas didn't just wait for clients to come to him. He began attending local business networking events, shaking hands with owners, exchanging business cards, and learning about their challenges. Unlike before, he no longer felt like a failure. He walked with confidence, his handshake was firm, and his smile was genuine. He was no longer begging for opportunities, he was creating them. But as his business grew, so did the challenges. Thomas quickly learned that being a successful entrepreneur wasn't just about having clients, it was about managing his time, finances, and reputation. He hired a young assistant, Emily, to help manage his schedule and client communications. Emily was efficient, enthusiastic, and quickly became an essential part of his growing empire. With Emily's help, Thomas streamlined his operations. He developed service packages, basic consulting for startups, advanced strategy for growing businesses, and personalized coaching for business leaders. This approach allowed him to serve more clients without being overwhelmed. One of his most significant breakthroughs came when he secured his first corporate client, a medium-sized tech company struggling with employee turnover and low productivity. Thomas spent weeks analyzing their operations, interviewing staff, and designing a customized management program. Within a month, the company saw a dramatic improvement, and the CEO publicly praised him on social media. That single recommendation brought a wave of new clients. Financially, Thomas's situation transformed. His consulting fees were no longer just a means to survive. He was making more in a month than he had ever earned in a year at Lambert Industries. He paid off his debts, upgraded his and Claire's apartment, and even surprised her with a weekend getaway to the countryside, their first vacation in years. But success didn't change who he was. Thomas remained humble, remembering the dark days when he felt worthless. He made it a point to mentor young entrepreneurs, sharing his story of betrayal, despair, and eventual triumph. His YouTube channel continued to grow, becoming a trusted resource for small business owners. One evening, as he sat on the balcony of his new apartment, sipping coffee and watching the city lights, his phone buzzed. It was Emily. "Thomas, we've received an invitation to speak at the local business expo next month. They want you to share your journey and give a talk on overcoming business challenges." Thomas smiled. The man who once walked the city in shame, handing out flyers, was now being invited to speak as an expert. But his rise didn't go unnoticed. A shadow from his past was watching. Mr. Lambert, the man who had betrayed and fired him, had heard of Thomas's growing success. Lambert Industries was struggling. Poor management, declining sales, and a lack of innovation had brought them to the edge of bankruptcy. Late one night, as Thomas was preparing a new video script for his YouTube channel, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He answered, and a familiar voice echoed on the line, weak, nervous, but unmistakable. "Thomas? It's Mr. Lambert." Thomas felt a rush of emotions, anger, shock, and a strange sense of satisfaction. But he kept his voice steady. "Mr. Lambert? What can I do for you? I need your help. The company is in trouble. We're losing clients, and I don't know what to do. I heard about your consulting firm. I thought maybe you could help us." Thomas leaned back in his chair, a faint smile forming on his lips. The tables had turned. The man who had thrown him out like garbage was now begging for his expertise. But Thomas didn't let his emotions control him. "Of course, Mr. Lambert. I'm always willing to help businesses in need. Let's schedule a meeting." He hung up, his heart racing. For the first time in years, Thomas felt something he had never expected, power. The question now was, how would he use it? Thomas leaned back in his chair, staring at his phone, the call with Mr. Lambert still fresh in his mind. A part of him felt a rush of satisfaction. The man who had once humiliated him, who had cast him aside without a second thought, was now coming to him for help. But another part of Thomas felt a quiet sense of responsibility. After all, he had built his success on helping struggling businesses, and Lambert Industries was now just another client in need. The next morning, Thomas arrived at his office with a newfound confidence. His assistant, Emily, noticed his thoughtful expression. "Everything okay, Thomas?" she asked, bringing him his morning coffee. He smiled. "Better than okay, Emily. I have a meeting with Mr. Lambert this afternoon." Emily's eyes widened. "Your old boss? The one who?" "Yes. The one who fired me," Thomas confirmed, a slight smile playing on his lips. "But today, he's the one asking for my help." Emily couldn't hide her excitement. "That's incredible. Are you going to help him?" Thomas sipped his coffee, the warmth calming his thoughts. "Yes, but on my terms." That afternoon, Thomas walked into the familiar glass building of Lambert Industries. The once bustling lobby was now a shadow of its former self, empty chairs, silent phones, and a receptionist who looked almost relieved to see someone walk in. "Mr. Thomas is here to see Mr. Lambert," he announced. The receptionist quickly called upstairs, and within minutes, an anxious Mr. Lambert appeared. He looked older, his hair grayer, his face lined with stress. "Thomas. Thank you for coming," Mr. Lambert stammered, extending a shaking hand. Thomas shook his hand firmly, maintaining a polite smile. "Of course. Let's talk." Lambert led him to the executive conference room, the same room where Thomas had once been fired. Memories of that humiliating day flashed through his mind, but he pushed them aside. Today, he was in control. Mr. Lambert wasted no time explaining the situation. "Thomas, we're in serious trouble. Our biggest clients have left. Sales have plummeted, and our best employees have resigned. I don't know how to fix it." Thomas listened carefully, taking notes. His expression remained calm and professional, but inside, he felt a sense of vindication. This was the same man who had once dismissed his loyalty without a second thought, now practically begging for his guidance. "How long have you been experiencing these losses?" Thomas asked, his tone direct. "It started about a year ago. We lost our first major client, then another, and it's been a downward spiral ever since," Lambert admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "What about your management team? Have they tried implementing any solutions?" Thomas inquired, maintaining his neutral expression. Lambert sighed. "Most of them left. The ones who stayed, they're inexperienced. They can't seem to keep the teams motivated." Thomas nodded, making more notes. He had already identified several critical issues: leadership failure, employee morale, and client retention. But he wasn't going to solve everything in one meeting. He needed to take control strategically. "Mr. Lambert, I can help you. But it won't be easy, and it won't be cheap," Thomas declared, leaning forward. Lambert's face fell slightly. "Of course. We're willing to pay for your expertise, Thomas." Thomas smiled subtly. "Excellent. Here's how this will work. My consulting firm, Strategic Solutions, will take over as your lead advisor. I will restructure your management, implement new strategies, and rebuild client trust. But my terms are clear: I will have complete authority over decision-making during this process. If you want to save this company, you'll trust my judgment entirely." Lambert hesitated, his pride visibly struggling against his desperation. But he had no choice. "Agreed." Thomas pulled out a contract he had prepared beforehand, listing his terms clearly: a significant consulting fee, full control over operational decisions, and a clause that would allow him to take a percentage of the company's shares if his strategies led to profitability. Lambert's hands trembled slightly as he signed the document. Thomas maintained his composure, but inside, he felt a sense of poetic justice. The man who had once discarded him was now putting the future of his company in his hands. As Thomas left the office, the familiar halls of Lambert Industries felt different. No longer did they seem cold and oppressive. They were now his domain. Employees who recognized him whispered among themselves, some even smiled, remembering his hard work and leadership. Back in his car, Thomas allowed himself a moment to breathe. He had just made the most significant deal of his career. Not only was he going to save the company that had betrayed him, but he was going to do it on his terms. He had gone from a discarded employee to a powerful consultant holding the company's future in his hands. But Thomas knew this was only the beginning. Saving Lambert Industries was a challenge, and if he succeeded, it would solidify his reputation as a business savior. If he failed, it could damage everything he had built. But Thomas wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Thomas stepped into Lambert Industries the following Monday morning, no longer as an employee but as the company's chief consultant. The atmosphere was tense. Employees whispered among themselves, their gazes filled with curiosity and uncertainty. Some recognized him, the once loyal manager who had been unceremoniously fired. But today, he walked with purpose, a sense of authority radiating from him. Mr. Lambert had reluctantly introduced Thomas to the remaining management team, a mix of inexperienced supervisors and a few veterans who had stayed out of loyalty or desperation. Most of them seemed skeptical, their expressions guarded as Thomas spoke. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Thomas, your new lead consultant. I understand that the company has been facing challenges, and my job is to help us overcome them. But for that to happen, we need to work together, openly, efficiently, and without excuses." One of the senior managers, Mr. Grant, crossed his arms and leaned back. "With all due respect, Mr. Thomas, we've tried everything. The market is tough, and our clients have lost trust. What makes you think you can fix what we couldn't?" Thomas met his gaze calmly. "Because I understand this company better than most. I spent over a decade here, working with teams, solving problems, and driving growth. I know the potential it has, and I know the mistakes that led us here. But I won't waste time blaming anyone. I'm here to get results." A few skeptical murmurs filled the room, but Thomas remained composed. "Starting today, I will be restructuring the management team. Those who are willing to learn and adapt will have my full support. Those who resist change will find themselves replaced." The room fell silent. Thomas's voice was steady, his authority clear. He wasn't here to play games. He was here to save a sinking ship, and he wasn't going to let egos get in the way. Over the next few days, Thomas conducted a thorough analysis of Lambert Industries. He reviewed financial statements, client records, employee performance data, and customer feedback. It was worse than he had imagined. Client retention was abysmal, customer complaints were at an all-time high, and employee morale was practically non-existent. Thomas's first move was to establish a new leadership structure. He promoted a few promising employees from the lower levels, those who showed initiative and a willingness to learn. At the same time, he let go of a few senior managers who were more interested in protecting their pride than improving the company. Next, he introduced a client recovery program. He reached out personally to some of the company's lost clients, apologizing for past mistakes and offering them customized solutions. His honest, straightforward approach won back a few key accounts. Those clients were surprised to see Thomas, a man they remembered as a dedicated employee, now leading the charge. He also revamped employee training, creating a series of workshops on customer service, leadership, and teamwork. He encouraged open communication, allowing employees to share their frustrations and ideas without fear of reprisal. For the first time in years, the staff felt heard. But not everyone was on board. Mr. Grant, the senior manager who had challenged Thomas, continued to undermine him subtly. He spread rumors that Thomas was just a temporary fix and that his changes would never work. Some employees were influenced by Grant's negativity, but Thomas didn't confront him directly, not yet. Instead, Thomas focused on results. Within a month, client satisfaction improved by 40%, and new client inquiries began to trickle in. Revenue saw a slight but noticeable increase, and for the first time in a long while, the company wasn't losing money. One Friday afternoon, as Thomas was finalizing a new marketing strategy, Mr. Lambert walked into his office, a cautious smile on his face. "Thomas, I have to admit, I didn't expect things to turn around this quickly. Your strategies, they're working." Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression calm. "Thank you, Mr. Lambert. But this is just the beginning. We have a long way to go." "I understand," Lambert nodded, but his eyes betrayed a mix of relief and insecurity. "But I've been hearing some complaints, from Mr. Grant and a few others. They say you're being too harsh. That you're trying to take over." Thomas smiled slightly. "Mr. Lambert, do you want me to save this company, or do you want me to keep everyone comfortable while it collapses?" Lambert hesitated, then sighed. "You're right. Keep doing what you're doing." Thomas nodded, but as Lambert left, he knew one thing for sure: Mr. Grant was going to be a problem. He was the last remnant of the old, failing leadership, and his bitterness was a poison spreading among the staff. That evening, Thomas called Emily. "I need you to prepare a full performance report for all department heads, including Mr. Grant. We're going to identify strengths, weaknesses, and necessary changes." Emily's voice was confident. "Already on it, Thomas." Hanging up, Thomas leaned back, a sense of resolve filling him. He wasn't just fixing a broken company. He was rebuilding it from the ground up. And anyone who stood in his way, even an old rival like Mr. Grant, would be dealt with. But beneath his calm exterior, Thomas knew that saving Lambert Industries was as much a personal mission as it was a professional challenge. This was his chance to prove his worth, not just to Mr. Lambert or the employees, but to himself. Thomas's success at turning Lambert Industries around wasn't without its challenges. Despite his clear strategies and visible improvements, one person continued to resist him: Mr. Grant. The senior manager who had questioned Thomas from the start became an open critic, spreading doubt and undermining his authority. Grant whispered to employees that Thomas was just using them to build his own empire, that he was making decisions without understanding the company's true culture. He fueled resentment, convincing some staff members that Thomas's changes were too harsh, too fast. But Thomas wasn't blind. He saw the subtle glances, the sudden silences when he entered a room, and the whispers behind his back. At first, he chose to ignore them, focusing on results. After all, success was the best way to silence critics. But Grant's toxic influence was spreading, and it threatened to undo everything Thomas was building. One Monday morning, as Thomas was reviewing the weekly performance reports with Emily, he noticed something troubling. Productivity in Grant's department had plummeted. Customer complaints from that department were unusually high, and several employees had resigned, citing a toxic work environment. "Emily, can you get me the detailed reports for Grant's department? I want to see the employee feedback and client interactions," Thomas requested, his voice calm but firm. Within an hour, Emily returned with a thick folder. As Thomas reviewed it, his suspicions were confirmed. Grant wasn't just complaining about Thomas, he was actively sabotaging his efforts. He had given misleading instructions to his team, delayed client responses, and even deleted emails containing new procedures Thomas had introduced. Thomas felt a surge of anger but quickly calmed himself. He knew that acting out of emotion would only play into Grant's narrative of him being a tyrant. Instead, he needed to be strategic. That afternoon, he called for an emergency management meeting. All department heads were present, including Grant, who sat with his usual smug expression. Thomas stood at the head of the table, his face calm but his gaze sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem," Thomas began. "While most of our departments are showing clear signs of improvement, one department has consistently failed to meet expectations. Customer complaints are high, employee turnover is alarming, and productivity is declining. I'm talking about Mr. Grant's department." Grant's expression shifted, but he forced a smile. "Perhaps because your changes are too aggressive, Thomas. People need time to adapt." "Adapt?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Or are they being misled? Because I have here several reports of employees being instructed to ignore new procedures, of clients being misinformed, and of key documents being deleted." The room fell silent. Grant's face turned pale. You're accusing me of sabotage?" "I'm not accusing you of anything, Grant. The reports speak for themselves. But I believe in transparency. So I'm giving you a chance to explain yourself. Right here, in front of everyone." Grant's eyes darted around the room, seeking support, but the other managers looked away. They had seen the improvements under Thomas's leadership. Even those who were skeptical at first now respected him. "You've always been a manipulator, Thomas," Grant spat, abandoning his pretense. "Coming here, pretending to save the company, but really just building your own empire. We see through your act." Thomas didn't flinch. "I'm here because this company was sinking, and I'm the one pulling it back from the brink. I've earned my position through results, not politics." Grant stood up, his face red with anger. "This place was fine before you came in and started tearing it apart." Thomas leaned forward, his voice cold but calm. "If this place was fine, Grant, then why did I find it on the edge of bankruptcy? Why did Mr. Lambert have to beg me to save it?" A heavy silence filled the room. Grant looked around, but there was no support left for him. His own failures were too obvious. Finally, he grabbed his papers and stormed out. Thomas looked around the table. "Let this be a reminder. My job is to save this company. Anyone who stands in the way of that goal is free to leave." The managers nodded, some with relief, others with respect. After the meeting, Mr. Lambert approached Thomas. "That was intense. Do you think we were too hard on Grant?" Thomas shook his head. "Mr. Lambert, leadership is about making tough decisions. Grant was holding the company back. Now, we can move forward." But he wasn't done. That evening, Thomas had a private meeting with the remaining staff in Grant's department. He listened to their grievances, acknowledged their frustrations, and promised a fresh start. He reassured them that he wasn't here to destroy the company, but to rebuild it. As the employees opened up, Thomas saw their anxiety fade, replaced by a cautious hope. He assigned a new manager, a young, dynamic woman named Sarah, who had proven herself in another department. Her enthusiasm and fairness quickly won over the team. In the following weeks, Grant's old department saw a dramatic improvement in performance. Customer complaints dropped, employee satisfaction rose, and new clients began to sign on. But Thomas wasn't celebrating yet. He knew that success in business wasn't just about fixing problems, it was about maintaining progress. His focus remained sharp, his determination stronger than ever. One evening, as he stood in his office, looking at the city lights, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "Mr. Lambert wants to see you tomorrow morning. He says it's urgent." Thomas felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever it was, he was ready. He had turned a crumbling company into a thriving one. And no one could take that from him. The next morning, Thomas walked into Mr. Lambert's office, his mind calm but curious. After weeks of relentless work, turning the company around, he wondered what new challenge awaited him. Mr. Lambert sat behind his desk, a mix of anxiety and guilt on his face. "Thomas, thank you for coming," Lambert began, gesturing for him to sit. "Of course. What's the urgent matter?" Thomas asked, maintaining his calm professionalism. Lambert hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. "Thomas, you've done an incredible job here. You saved this company from collapse, and I'm grateful. But we have a problem. A serious one." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "Go on." "It's about the company's finances," Lambert admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. We're being audited." An audit. That was hardly unexpected for a company that had been struggling. But Thomas noticed Lambert's anxious expression and realized there was more to the story. "And is that a problem?" Thomas probed, keeping his voice steady. Lambert looked away, shame coloring his face. "Thomas, during the financial crisis last year, we manipulated some of the financial records. To keep the company afloat, I authorized some questionable transactions." Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. "Questionable? Or fraudulent?" Lambert's shoulders slumped. "Fraudulent. We reported higher revenue than we actually made, and we understated our debts. It was supposed to be a temporary measure, but it spiraled out of control." Thomas's mind raced. He had worked tirelessly to turn this company around, to rebuild it on a foundation of integrity and efficiency. But now, that foundation was tainted. Worse, he was the one who had presented the company as a trustworthy partner to new clients. His reputation was tied to Lambert Industries. "Why are you telling me this now?" Thomas demanded, his voice icy. "Because the auditors will find out, and when they do, the company could be shut down. I could go to prison." But you're respected, Thomas. You have a clean reputation. If you could help me present a case to the auditors, something that minimizes the damage." Thomas stood, his jaw clenched. "You want me to cover up your fraud?" No, not cover up." Lambert stammered, panic in his voice. Just explain it as a misunderstanding, help negotiate a settlement. Your word carries weight now. They would listen to you." Thomas's heart pounded with anger and disappointment. After everything he had done to save this company, Lambert's greed and dishonesty threatened to destroy it all. He had a choice to make: protect Lambert and his own reputation, or expose the truth and risk everything. "Mr. Lambert, I gave this company everything I had. I built it back up from the ashes you left behind. But I did it with integrity. And now you want me to risk my name to save yours?" Thomas's voice was firm, his eyes cold. "Thomas, please. If this company collapses, it's not just me who suffers. The employees, the clients, they all depend on us now. You've turned this place into something great again. Don't let one mistake destroy it all." "One mistake?" Thomas laughed bitterly. "This isn't a mistake. It's a crime." Lambert's desperation grew. "If you walk away, everything you built here will collapse. Your reputation will be tarnished too. People will think you were part of this mess." Thomas stared at the man who had once fired him without hesitation, now begging for his help. The irony was almost poetic. But he had to make a choice: protect his own name and walk away, or try to save the company without compromising his integrity. After a long silence, Thomas spoke. "I won't lie for you, Mr. Lambert. But I will try to save this company, on one condition." "Anything, Thomas. Anything." Lambert blurted, his hope rekindled. "You will step down as CEO. Immediately. I will take over, and I will be fully transparent with the auditors. We will report the misconduct honestly, cooperate fully, and work to restore trust. If you're lucky, that transparency might save you from prison. But if you refuse, I walk, and I'll expose everything myself." Lambert's face went pale. "Step down? But this is my company." "It was your company. Now, it's mine. Choose, Mr. Lambert." Lambert's hands trembled, but he saw the resolve in Thomas's eyes. He had no choice. With a heavy sigh, he nodded. "Agreed." Thomas walked out of Lambert's office, his heart pounding but his mind clear. He immediately called a meeting with the senior management team and announced the transition. Mr. Lambert was stepping down, and Thomas would be the acting CEO. There were murmurs of shock, some of confusion, but Thomas's calm confidence silenced any protests. He then met with Emily. "Emily, I need you to prepare a full financial audit from the past 3 years. We're going to be completely honest with the auditors." Emily's eyes widened. "Thomas, are you sure?" "I'm not risking my integrity for anyone, Emily. Not even for this company. We fix this the right way, or we don't fix it at all." Over the next few days, Thomas worked tirelessly, reviewing financial records, correcting false entries, and preparing a complete and honest report for the auditors. He met with the employees, explaining the situation with transparency, gaining their trust. The day of the audit arrived. Thomas stood before the auditors with a clear conscience. He didn't lie. He didn't exaggerate. He told the truth, explained the previous misconduct, and presented his plan to rebuild the company with integrity. The lead auditor, a stern woman with sharp eyes, listened carefully. At the end of the meeting, she stood and extended her hand. "Mr. Thomas, it's rare to see this level of honesty in a situation like this. We will report your cooperation and our findings. Thomas shook her hand, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He had chosen the hard path, but it was the right one. The days following the audit were tense. Thomas knew that the auditors could recommend severe penalties for Lambert Industries. He had been transparent with them, but that didn't guarantee mercy. Employees whispered anxiously in the hallways, and even Emily's usually calm demeanor showed signs of stress. But Thomas remained a steady force. He continued managing the company, ensuring that operations ran smoothly, clients were satisfied, and employees stayed motivated. His commitment was unwavering, and his integrity became a source of inspiration. Employees who once doubted him now saw him as a leader who not only saved their jobs but did so with honesty. 1 week later, the audit report arrived. Thomas called an emergency meeting with the management team. As they gathered in the conference room, tension filled the air. Even Mr. Lambert, who now sat quietly in the back of the room as a mere observer, seemed drained, his face pale and his hands shaking. Thomas stood at the front, the audit report in his hands. He took a deep breath. The auditors have completed their investigation. They have acknowledged our full cooperation and transparency. As a result, we will not face any criminal charges. A collective sigh of relief swept across the room. Some managers even clapped, but Thomas raised his hand, silencing them. However, there are still consequences. We must pay a substantial fine, and we will be monitored for the next 2 years to ensure full compliance. But we are still here. We are still in business. Mr. Lambert leaned back, his eyes filled with both relief and shame. Thomas continued, "We have a long road ahead, but we are starting this journey with a clean slate. And from this moment on, integrity is not just a word for us, it is our foundation." After the meeting, Thomas returned to his office, feeling a mix of exhaustion and pride. Emily walked in, a wide smile on her face. "Thomas, you did it. You saved the company." "No, Emily. We did it," Thomas corrected, smiling back. "And we did it the right way." But the challenges weren't over. With Mr. Lambert officially stepping down, Thomas needed to appoint a new management team. He promoted the most dedicated employees, including Sarah, who had proven herself in Grant's old department. Grant, who had been a source of sabotage, was now gone, and his toxic influence with him. Thomas also knew he needed to rebuild client trust. He personally called their most important clients, explaining the company's commitment to transparency and integrity. Some were impressed, even admiring his honesty. Others were hesitant, but Thomas's sincerity won them over. He launched a new marketing campaign, proudly proclaiming, "Lambert Industries, rebuilt with integrity." The campaign featured testimonials from employees, clients, and even suppliers, all speaking of the company's transformation. On social media, Thomas began sharing the company's journey, the challenges they had faced, the mistakes they had corrected, and the values they now embraced. His honesty was refreshing in an industry where most businesses hid their problems. His YouTube channel, which had begun as a small platform for business advice, now became a source of inspiration. His videos on leadership, crisis management, and integrity in business gained thousands of views. One of his videos, "How I Saved a Company by Telling the Truth," went viral. Business leaders praised him, and struggling entrepreneurs reached out for advice. He was no longer just a consultant, he was becoming a respected voice in the industry. Financially, Lambert Industries stabilized. Clients returned, new clients signed on, and revenue grew steadily. The company that had once been on the edge of collapse was now thriving again, but this time on a foundation of honesty. Thomas didn't forget the employees who had stood by him. He implemented a profit-sharing plan, ensuring that everyone who contributed to the company's success enjoyed its rewards. Morale soared, and employees felt a sense of pride in their work. But perhaps the most powerful moment came one Friday evening. As Thomas was preparing to leave the office, Mr. Lambert knocked on his door. The once arrogant businessman now looked humble, almost timid. "Thomas, may I speak with you?" Lambert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course." "Have a seat," Thomas replied, his tone neutral. Lambert hesitated before sitting. I wanted to thank you. You didn't have to save this company. You could have exposed me, ruined me. But you didn't. I didn't do it for you, Mr. Lambert. I did it for the employees who depend on this company, and for the clients who trust us. And I did it for myself, because I refused to succeed through dishonesty, Thomas explained, his voice calm but firm. Lambert nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I was a fool. My pride, my greed, they nearly destroyed everything. But you've built something I never could, a company with a soul. Thomas leaned back, his expression softening. Everyone makes mistakes, Mr. Lambert. The difference is what we choose to do after we've made them. Lambert stood, wiping his eyes. Thank you, Thomas. For everything. After Lambert left, Thomas looked out of his office window, the city lights glowing beneath the darkening sky. His journey had begun with betrayal, humiliation, and despair. But he had risen from the ashes, not just by building a business, but by staying true to his values. He had proven to himself, and to everyone else, that success built on integrity was not only possible but far more rewarding. But he wasn't done. With Lambert Industries thriving, Thomas began exploring new ventures. He wanted to help other struggling businesses, to teach them that honesty wasn't just a moral choice, it was a strategy for success. His empire was growing, and he was ready to lead it with courage and integrity. Thomas stood on the balcony of his corner office, the city skyline stretching out before him, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. He sipped his coffee, feeling a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. Lambert Industries was no longer just a company he had saved, it was a symbol of his journey, a testament to resilience, integrity, and transformation. Months had passed since the audit, and the company was thriving under his leadership. His decision to be transparent with the auditors, to expose the fraud rather than hide it, had turned what could have been a disaster into a victory. His reputation for honesty and courage spread beyond the walls of Lambert Industries. Business leaders invited him to speak at conferences, and his YouTube channel continued to grow, with thousands of subscribers who looked to him for guidance. His most popular video, How Integrity Saved My Business, became a source of inspiration for entrepreneurs worldwide. He wasn't just a businessman now, he was a leader. Thomas had also diversified. With Lambert Industries stabilized, he launched a new venture, TruthWorks Consulting. A consulting firm dedicated to helping struggling businesses rebuild, not just through strategy, but through honesty and ethical leadership. His firm quickly gained high-profile clients, businesses that wanted his expertise and, more importantly, his values. Emily, his loyal assistant, became his business partner at TruthWorks. Her dedication and skill were essential to his success, and he trusted her judgment completely. Together, they hired a team of talented consultants, all trained to follow Thomas's philosophy: success without integrity is just failure waiting to be exposed. One morning, as Thomas reviewed the latest financial reports, Emily entered his office with a wide smile. "Thomas, you need to see this." She handed him a letter. It was from the Regional Business Integrity Association. They had selected Thomas for their Excellence in Ethical Leadership Award. Thomas smiled, a sense of quiet pride warming his heart. "I didn't think I'd ever be known for something like this." "You earned it, Thomas. Not just by saving Lambert Industries, but by proving that honesty is a strength, not a weakness," Emily said, beaming. The awards ceremony was a grand event, with business leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives from across the country in attendance. Thomas stood on stage, a spotlight on him, his name announced to thunderous applause. He stepped up to the microphone, pausing for a moment to take in the crowd. But as he looked out at the faces of those who admired him, his mind flashed back to that dark day when he was fired, humiliated, and broken. How far he had come. "Thank you," he began, his voice clear and confident. "I stand here tonight not just because I built a successful business, but because I chose a different path, a path of honesty, even when it was difficult. A path of integrity, even when it seemed like a disadvantage." The audience listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others leaning forward. Integrity is not just a virtue, it's a strategy. In a world full of shortcuts, deception, and greed, honesty is the ultimate advantage. Because when you build something on the foundation of truth, it doesn't just survive, it thrives. The room erupted in applause. As Thomas stepped down from the stage, dozens of people approached him, thanking him, asking for advice, sharing their own struggles. He listened to each of them, offering words of encouragement, knowing that his story had become more than just his own. Back at his office, Thomas placed the award on his desk. But for him, the real reward wasn't the trophy, it was the knowledge that he had built something real, something that would last. Lambert Industries continued to grow under his leadership. Sarah, the young manager he had promoted, became the new operations director, her energy and innovation driving the company to new heights. Employees were proud to work there, knowing they were part of a company that valued honesty above all. One day, Mr. Lambert visited the office. Now retired, he looked healthier, more at peace. He shook Thomas's hand. "I never thought I would say this, but thank you, Thomas. You didn't just save my company. You saved me." Thomas smiled, but his response was gentle. "I only did what was right. The rest was up to you." Lambert left with a quiet dignity, and Thomas watched him go, feeling no resentment, only a sense of closure. As the years passed, TruthWorks Consulting became a respected brand, and Thomas became a mentor to young entrepreneurs, teaching them that the greatest asset a business can have is a reputation for integrity. But Thomas never forgot where he started. His story wasn't just about revenge or redemption. It was about transformation, about choosing honesty when betrayal seemed easier, about choosing courage when fear was overwhelming. One evening, as he walked home, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. "Just made your favorite dinner. Can't wait to hear about your day. I'm so proud of you." Thomas smiled, his heart warm. He had gained more than just a successful business. He had gained a life he could be proud of. Because in the end, success isn't about how much you earn, but about who you become.